When Prismatic Evolutions comes to Pokemon TCG Live on January 16th, it will have over 175 cards. That being said, the main set will only feature 131 cards, and the vast majority of those are either reprints, leftover garbage from Japanese starter decks, or regional variants for Professor's research and Black Belt's practice. So when I count down the top 10 best cards coming in Prismatic Evolutions, just know that there's not actually 10 good new cards, and I'm only doing this to make sure the title of this YouTube video isn't clickbait. After poring over, frankly, too many winning Japanese lists, I came to the conclusion that Budew is the best card in the set. You're probably tired of hearing how crazy this card is, so I won't dwell on it for too long. For 0 energy, Budew does 10 damage and item locks your opponent. Go second, use Itchy Pollen, and now that pesky Charizard or Dragapult deck can't rare candy a stage 2 directly into play. At worst, Budew can buy you a turn. This is perfect for stage 1 decks like Ceruledge EX that don't really do anything turn 1. At best, Budew buys you multiple turns and maybe forces early concedes on live because the day Budew comes out is when the ranked ladder resets everyone to Poké League. Since you're not punished for losing before Master League, anybody who gets screwed over by Budew will just quit and try again. To mix things up, let's talk about how you can deal with Budew. For stage 2 decks, you'll have to play TM Evolution and maybe Grand Tree. This also means Pidgeotto will see more play than ever. For everybody else, you can put a Hitmonchan in your deck, which can be retreated with Rescue Board or Latias EX. When they attack with Budew, counterattack will KO it, essentially giving you a free prize. You'll still be item locked, but maybe the prize card will help. And come Journey Together on March 27th, Hopzation EX can KO a bench Budew after Iron Bundling, while also dealing a good chunk of damage to their active. By far, the second best card in Prismatic Evolutions is Regigigas. For 4 colorless energy, you one-shot every Terra Pokemon in the game except Tyranitar EX, which no one's playing. While I personally will be making a gameplay video focused on Regigigas when it's out, the best uses are by putting a single copy into existing decks. The prime candidates are Chien-Pao EX, Lugia V-Star, and Lost Box, though life might be a little tough for Chien-Pao in a world with Budew. Still, Regigigas instantly makes all 3 of those decks better, giving them a way to easily KO a Charizard EX, Dragapult EX, Hydreigon EX, Terrapados EX, and so much more. Originally, the number 3 spot was going to go to Blaziken EX. Unfortunately for all of us, it's not in Prismatic Evolutions. Blaziken opened up a lot of possibilities for whacking off with Pikachu EX and Galvantula EX. Now that it's being pushed to a post-rotation release, the landscape of Standard will be different, and that sucks for all of us. We don't know exactly when Blaziken will release in English, but since Torchic and Combustion also have to come out, then it does make a Journey Together release at the end of March highly likely. Because of this disappointing decision, everything else on the list gets bumped up 1 spot. Okay, so how about I put Lilligant in the number 3 slot since that's the next best card? Well, guess what? The Pokemon Company decided to hold that one back too. Lilligant boosts the damage your fire and grass type Pokemon deal by 20, and it stacks. This makes the Festival lead deck better and would have made a solo Radiant Charizard deck stronger. But just like Blaziken, Lilligant's coming out post-rotation, so you'll never be able to pair it with Radiant Zard. Yeah, the Pokemon Company really went out of their way to make Prismatic Evolutions as much of a non-competitive set as possible. Okay, I promise I'm done complaining, for a few minutes at least. Getting back to the top 10 best cards actually in the set, based on what I've seen from Japan, the best evolution in Prismatic Evolutions will be Flareon EX. The first attack is great early, dealing 130 damage and accelerating 2 energy from deck. Then you can finish someone off with Carnelian, which does 280 damage at the cost of not attacking the following turn. Attach a Maximum Belt, that 280 becomes 330 and lets you one-shot a Charizard or Dragapult. And let's not forget that the boosted evolution Eevee can evolve on turn 1, provided it's in the active spot. So power it up with a Glass Trumpet or do some crazy Teal Mask Ogerpon EX energy switch plays, and you can get a good amount of energy into play early. As I mentioned in my Prismatic Evolutions preview video, Flareon EX, Vaporeon EX, and Jolteon EX all use the same energy for their secondary attack. Since Eevee can evolve into all of them, you're free to chuck in a copy or 2 of Jolteon EX with Flareon EX, as it can also do 240 damage for 2 energy. According to some weirdos on the internet, Vaporeon is a useful Pokemon in other areas, but unfortunately in the Pokemon TCG it sucks. The first attack doesn't spread damage to Terra Pokemon because of the built-in bench barrier, and there isn't really anything you need to hit a water weakness with, so just stick with Jolteon EX as Flareon EX's best partner. The reason Eevee EX has such a high billing is that anyone who wants to play an Evolution deck come Prismatic Evolutions will have to run it. That's because it's a Terra Pokemon that evolves into an Evolution, meaning you don't have to run a different basic Terra Pokemon to activate Glass Trumpet or Area Zero on turn 1. It also shares the same energy requirements as the 3 Kanto evolutions, but 200 damage for 3 different types of energy isn't exactly amazing. Honestly, on its own, EVEX kinda sucks, but if you want to use any of the evolutions, it becomes a very necessary card. On paper, Max Rod is insane. Play with your Rod, go and get 5 in any combination of Pokemon or basic energy from your discard pile. It's literally 5 Night Stretchers in one. Unfortunately, it's not going to supplant Prime Catcher or Unfair Stamp or Maximum Belt or Hero's Tape as the best H-specs in the game. Because in a format where you need as little as 2 KOs to win, retrieving 5 Pokemon isn't all that necessary. Still, if your Rod is getting rusty and you want to whack off with it, you can always make a crazy Dusclops recovery deck. Blow up a bunch of Dusclops and Dusknoir, recover them with Max Rod, shorten the game, and take a KO with Ursaluna EX before your opponent can really do anything. If things like Night Stretcher and Lana's Aid didn't already exist, Max Rod would be crazy. Because they exist, it's still a good card, just not one you're likely to see all that often. Getting back to the evolutions, we have Jolteon EX at number 6. By far the one most commonly paired with Flareon, it does the boring but strong 280 damage for a Fire, Water, and Lightning energy with its second attack. Then there's Flashing Spear. For a Lightning and a Colorless, it does 60 base damage plus up to 180 more if you discard 2 basic energy from your Pokemon. For the mathematically challenged among you, that's up to 240 damage for 2 energy, or enough to one-shot a Raging Bolt EX. Coincidentally, Raging Bolt EX's attack is this, except much better. Ultimately, Jolteon EX nothing crazy, just a playable EX Pokemon that hits water types and Lugia V-Star for weakness. Because it'd feel weird not having another EX evolution in the top 10, Leafeon EX gets the number 7 spot. For a Grass and a Colorless, it does 60 damage for each energy attached to all of your opponent's Pokemon. Those of you who've been subscribed to me for a long time will know that that's the exact same attack as a card we don't talk about on the channel anymore. If you really want to use the first attack though, there's 2 cards to play. Orbeetle from Lost Origin and Grafaiai from Surging Sparks. Orbeetle's better since it's an ability, but it's also a stage 2. Grafaiai's second attack, meanwhile, is similar to Leafeon's, but it requires 2 darkness energy, making neither a perfect partner. And in a world where some top decks only need 1 or 2 energy in play to function, and someone like Raging Bolt discards energy while attacking, your opponent can easily play around Leafeon. So you can try to focus on the second attack, which does 230 damage and heals 100 from your bench Pokemon. Kricketune boosts the HP of your grass type, so you can bounce around between Leafeon EXs and try to heal your dudes. Yeah, the fact that Leafeon EX is the 3rd best evolution in Prismatic Evolutions and requires this many hoopas to jump through to maybe be playable shows you how uncompetitive they all are. With the shift to an EX-only format in March, protecting against Pokemon EX will be super strong. What makes Sylveon useful is that it evolves from Eevee. So you can put a single copy into any evolution deck and have a Pokemon that just walls your opponent at the end of a game. And if you want to attack with it, all you need is a Psychic Energy or Luminous Energy or Legacy Energy plus the 2 Colorless Energy. Problem is, Mimikyu already exists to fill the role of an EX blocker, and it's not like Sylveon's attack is all that much better, and it won't survive a Dusknoir explosion either. Still, with Canceling Cologne rotating in March, it'll have a place in Standard, just not a remarkable one. I probably should have stopped this list by now, but let's talk about Black Belt's practice for a second. Play it and your attacks do 40 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon EX. Attach a Maximum Belt, now you can deal plus 90 damage to an EX. And with rotation removing all non-EX multiprizers from Standard in March, you don't have to worry about V Pokemon ruining your strategy. But Kieran already exists. So while plus 40 damage to EX Pokemon is good, Kieran's a plus 30 and it has the added benefit of being a switch card if you really need it. I'm sure there will be a deck out there that wants to deal that 10 extra damage, but I think the versatility of Kieran will always make it the better option. For the final spot in my completely arbitrary top 10 list for a massively disappointing special set, we have, I don't know, Amaris, because why not? At its core, Amaris is a Draw 4 supporter. Draw 3 supporters have been around since Shauna was legal, but the Pokemon Company always gets hesitant when raising that number by 1. Something like Istan requires a Hisuian Pokemon in your active, while Coach Trainer forced you to have a Tag Team Pokemon in your active. With Amaris, there's no stipulation to draw the 4 cards, you just draw 4 cards. The drawback is that at the end of your turn, if you have 5 or more cards in your hand, you discard your entire hand. That's bad unless you're running United Wings or something. Otherwise, just make sure you play a bunch of items, and Amaris is the best Draw 4 supporter we've ever had. In terms of power level, I do think Morty's Conviction is better in an Area 0 world, but I managed to get 10 cards to fill out this list, and that's commendable. Alright, now that I've wasted your time with a top 10 list that should have been a top 2 list, let's see which cards you should actually be crafting in Pokemon TCG Live on the 16th. Since the best cards in Prismatic Evolutions are all Pokemon, let's start there. Realistically, you only need 1 or 2 copies of Bidoof, but since it's a common, go nuts. Getting 4 copies of the most impactful card in the set costs just 160 credits and allows you to screw over Stage 2 decks immediately. As for Regigigas, while you could go for more than 1 copy of this uncommon, it's unnecessary thanks to the existence of Heavy Ball and Night Stretcher. When Heavy Ball rotates in March, you might want a second copy, but until then, 1 will do for most players. Is Sylveon an attacking Pokemon? Yeah, why not? Even though it's a rare at 400 credits, I still think you should own 1 just to have it in your collection. As for Seaking, while it's not the strongest attacker out there, it can deal 120 damage for 1 energy and draw you 4 cards in a Festival Grounds deck. I'm personally underwhelmed by this card for several reasons, including the fact that Diplet is better, but you should still craft 2 copies. Switching to the Evolutions, you really only need 2 copies of Flareon EX for 1200 credits, plus 2 Eevee EX for 1200 credits. The Flareon count could be up to 3 for consistency. I just don't think you'll win too many games without having another attacker in the deck, making more than 2 somewhat unnecessary. I'll update my final crafting list once we know the free decks on the Prismatic Evolutions Battle Pass on Thursday, but I would guess there's a good chance they give us some Evolutions in them. Those other attackers for Flareon EX will be Jolteon EX and Leafeon EX. The good news is that you can get by with just 1 copy of each for 600 credits each. Rising and consistency are always something to keep in mind, but you essentially have to choose the right evolution for the right situation since none of them are great. So going overboard on copies isn't necessary. As for the other evolutions, Vaporeon, Umbreon, Espeon, and Glaceon can all be skipped because they suck. Yes, you can use some of them in very specific decks to maybe carve out some wins, but they are not worth crafting. And while Sylveon EX is in Prismatic Evolutions, it's just a reprint of the one from Surging Spark, so skip that one as well. To finish up this section, a new Tapu Koko EX and Tyranitar EX are coming in Prismatic Evolutions. They aren't worth crafting, but they're worth pointing out. With rotation, Miraidon loses Raikou V. Tapu Koko is a cheap imitation, topping out at 220 damage, but it does that for 2 energy with free retreat. Tyranitar EX, meanwhile, can deal 350 damage if you overload it with 7 energy, or its second attack does 150 damage and discards a card from their hand. Again, neither are worth crafting, just worth keeping in the back of your mind for the future. There's only 1 support Pokemon in Prismatic Evolutions that you might want to think about crafting, and that's Hoot Hoot. The new Hooters has 80 hit points, meaning it's slightly tougher to KO, but even against the Pecharunt Donk deck, it's still within their range. So the added 10 hit points doesn't help there, and it also means it can't be searched for with Buddy Buddy Poffin. You can still grab it with Fan Rotom though, but I don't think it's worth the trade-off, so skip it. Moving to the trainers, out of the 2 new A-Specs in Prismatic Evolutions, Maxrod isn't just the best, it's also the only one you want to craft. 5 Night Stretchers in 1 is crazy, and you will absolutely want one in your collection, even if it's not in the top 5 best A-Specs of all time. As for Treasure Tracker, unless you're playing Rotom V-Star, never even think about crafting it, the card sucks. And honestly, if you're wanting to give Rotom V-Star a whirl before it rotates at the end of March, Brilliant Blender is better than Treasure Tracker. Tracker puts the tools in your hand, while Blender puts them directly in your discard pile, which is more beneficial. Remember when I complained about cut cards from Prismatic Evolutions earlier in the video? Well, it continues with Black Belt's practice. 9 different arts exist in Japan, but in Prismatic Evolutions, we're only getting 4 of them. You realistically only need 1 copy of Black Belt's practice in your collection, so choose whichever art you like the best and craft it for 40 credits. Amaris is a tough one. While it is playable, it's very deck dependent. On the bright side, because it's a common, go wild and craft 4 for 160 credits. Or if you plan on taking a break from TCG Live until rotation at the end of March, you can definitely hold off. Speaking of holding off, Larry's Steel Issue is a terrible card. You discard your hand, then grab a Pokemon supporter and basic energy from your deck. Except you just played a supporter, so you can't play the new one. If it was a Pokemon item and any energy, maybe it sees play. Otherwise, aside from Hisui and Arcanine, I don't think anyone will have a use for it. Here's where I'm going to give you a choice harder than left foot or right foot. With Prismatic Evolutions, we're getting regional variants for Professor's Research. The good news is that for some reason they're commons and should only cost 40 credits each to craft. The bad news is that just like Black Belt's practice, there's 9 arts in Japan, but we're only getting 4 in Prismatic Evolutions. Oak, Elm, Rowan, and Sycamore are in, while Birch, Juniper, Kukui, Magnolia, and Sada are out. Yeah, don't ask me why they did this, especially when all still carry the G regulation mark, meaning they'll rotate in March 2026 if we don't get a reprint. While you probably already have 20 plus copies of Research, these ones are cooler and worth crafting to spice things up. It should only cost 160 credits for a playset of your favorite professor, so go nuts. An item we're finally getting after being stuck in the washing machine, in Japan, is Roto Stick. It's like Pokegear, except worse. Instead of looking at the top 7 cards and grabbing you 1 supporter, it looks at the top 4 and grabs you up to 4. Unless you're running a deck that really wants to discard supporters like Turbominable or Breaksin, it's not good. And even if you're playing Turbominable or Breaksin, Brilliant Blender is better every time. One item we're not getting in Prismatic Evolutions is TM Machine. This would have made Rotom V-Star kinda nuts in the final 2 months before rotation, but I guess they're saving it for Journey Together or maybe another set later this year. This means Rotom V-Star won't have a great card to buff it up before it's gone from standard at the end of March, and will kinda just fade away instead of making a meaningful impact on the meta. Ultimately, you only need to craft 2 cards from Prismatic Evolutions to remain competitive in the new format, and that's Badoo and Regigigas. Get yourself 2 copies of Badoo for 80 credits plus 1 Regigigas for 100 credits and you're done. Everything else is for players who are bored and want to try something else out before realizing the evolutions are all worse than Detective Pikachu Returns. And even then, it's just north of 5,000 credits to get every playable card in Prismatic Evolutions. While we wait for the new Battle Pass to hopefully be revealed this Thursday, let everyone know in the comments your thoughts about the set, because I just spent way too long complaining about it and I need you to back me up.